Hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's story. Your likes and subscriptions can give me hope to create better stories. And let me know what changes you'd like me to make to my voice. Alright, now let's get to tonight's story. Chapter 1. The Gentle Awakening. In a quiet valley where morning mist danced like silk scarves in the breeze, there lived a young woman named Iris. Her name, chosen by parents who loved the ancient stories, meant rainbow in the old Greek tongue. And indeed, Iris seemed to carry something of the rainbow's magic within her gentle spirit. The valley where Iris made her home was a place forgotten by time, where wildflowers grew in abundance and streams bubbled with the clearest water you could imagine. Here, the pace of life moved like honey on a cool morning, slow and golden, giving everyone time to notice the small wonders that city dwellers often missed. Iris lived in a cottage that seemed to have grown from the earth itself. Its walls were made of honey-coloured stone, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The roof was covered in moss so soft and green that birds often mistook it for a meadow, landing there to rest during their long migrations. Ivy climbed the walls in graceful spirals, its leaves rustling secrets to anyone who took the time to listen. Every morning, Iris would wake before dawn, not from obligation or hurry, but from a natural rhythm that connected her to the breathing of the earth. She would lie in her bed for a few moments, listening to the symphony of awakening around her. First came the gentle cooing of doves, their voices like liquid silver in the pre-dawn darkness. Then the cheerful chatter of sparrows, greeting the day with enthusiasm. Finally, the melodious call of a blackbird. Its song so pure and clear that it seemed to wash the very air clean. On this particular morning, as Iris opened her eyes, she noticed something different. The light filtering through her curtains carried an unusual quality, as if it had been painted with watercolours and left to dry in the gentle warmth of early spring. She rose slowly, her bare feet touching the cool wooden floor, and padded to the window. What she saw made her breath catch in wonder. During the night, her garden had transformed. Where yesterday there had been neat rows of herbs and vegetables, today there bloomed the most extraordinary flowers she had ever seen. They seemed to shimmer with their own inner light, their petals holding every colour imaginable, and some that seemed to exist only in dreams. But these were not ordinary flowers. As Iris watched, she realised they were irises, hundreds upon hundreds of them, in varieties she had never encountered in all her years of gardening. There were deep purple ones that looked like pieces of the midnight sky, white ones pure as fresh snow, yellow ones bright as captured sunshine, and blue ones that seemed to hold the very essence of a perfect summer day. Iris dressed quickly, but quietly, choosing her softest clothes so as not to disturb the morning's peace. She selected a flowing dress the colour of sage, its fabric worn smooth by years of wear, until it felt like a gentle embrace against her skin. Over this, she wrapped a shawl that had belonged to her grandmother, its pattern faded but still beautiful, like memories softened by time. Stepping outside, Iris felt the cool morning air kiss her cheeks and tangle gently in her hair. The grass was heavy with dew, each blade wearing tiny diamonds that caught and scattered the early light. She walked carefully through her transformed garden, marveling at the beauty that had appeared overnight, like a gift from some benevolent fairy tale. As she moved among the flowers, Iris began to notice something remarkable. Each iris seemed to whisper as she passed, not with words, but with feelings and images that flowed into her mind like gentle streams of consciousness. The purple iris crowns decorated with iris petals, believing the flowers would bring them wisdom in the afterlife. The white ones murmured of medieval monasteries, where monks carefully tended iris gardens and used the flowers to create illuminated manuscripts, their petals providing delicate dyes for the most sacred texts. The yellow irises sang softly of the Sun King, Louis XIV of France, who chose the iris as his royal symbol. They told of grand gardens at Versailles, where thousands of irises created living tapestries of gold and blue, their beauty reflecting the glory of the French court. And the blue ones whispered of Japanese gardens, where iris viewing became an art form, with families gathering each spring to contemplate the flowers' brief but perfect beauty, finding in them lessons about the precious nature of fleeting moments. Iris found herself drawn to a particular section of the garden, where the flowers grew in a perfect spiral pattern. At the center of this spiral was a single iris, unlike any of the others. Its petals seemed to contain all colors and no color at the same time, shifting and changing like the surface of a soap bubble. This iris was taller than the rest, its stem strong and graceful, its leaves a deep green that spoke of ancient wisdom. As Iris approached this central flower, she felt a profound sense of peace washing over her. The morning breeze seemed to slow, the birdsong became softer, and even the rustling of leaves took on a more gentle rhythm. She knelt beside the remarkable iris, her hands resting lightly on the dewy grass, and simply breathed. In that moment of stillness, Iris began to understand something profound. The garden had not appeared by magic, though it seemed magical enough. Instead, it was the result of something far more wonderful, the slow, patient work of love itself. For years, without realizing it, her gentle care of the earth, her kind attention to every living thing in her valley, and her peaceful presence had been preparing the soil for this moment of beauty. The ancient Greeks, she remembered from stories her grandmother used to tell, believed that Iris was the goddess of the rainbow, a messenger who travelled between heaven and earth. She understood now that she was meant to be a kind of messenger herself, not between gods and mortals, but between the natural world and the human heart. Her gift was to help others see the beauty that surrounded them always, to slow down enough to notice the miracles that bloomed in every season, to find peace in the simple rhythm of growth and rest that governed all living things. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, painting the morning in shades of gold and rose, Iris made a decision. She would share this garden, this magical place of beauty and peace, with others who needed what it offered. But she would do so carefully, thoughtfully, in a way that honored both the gift she had been given and the needs of those who would come seeking solace. She spent the rest of the morning walking slowly through the garden, learning the character of each section, understanding the subtle ways the flowers spoke to different aspects of the human spirit. Some areas felt deeply calming, perfect for those carrying anxiety or worry. Others seemed to inspire quiet contemplation, ideal for people seeking clarity or wisdom. Still others radiated a gentle joy that could lift the heaviest hearts without overwhelming sensitive souls. By noon, when the sun had warmed the earth and the dew had evaporated into sparkling mist, Iris had formed a plan. She would invite people to visit her garden, but only a few at a time, and only those who truly needed the healing that flowers and peace could provide. She would create a sanctuary where the rushing world could not enter, where the only sounds were natural ones, where the only pace was the gentle rhythm of breathing and blooming. That afternoon, Iris walked to the village that nestled in the next valley over. It was a small place, the kind where everyone knew everyone else's name and troubles. The houses were built of the same honey-coloured stone as her cottage, their red tile roofs glowing warm in the afternoon sun. Gardens spilled over fence lines, filled with practical vegetables and cheerful flowers that had been passed down through generations of careful gardeners. In the village square, near the ancient fountain that had provided fresh water for hundreds of years, Iris found what she was looking for: the community board where people posted notices about lost cats, garden produce for sale, and upcoming celebrations. Here, she placed a simple card, written in her careful, flowing handwriting. For those who seek peace and beauty, a garden waits in the valley of the morning mist. Come when your heart is heavy or your spirit needs rest. Follow the path of scattered rose petals. No payment required, only a willingness to sit quietly among the flowers and let their ancient wisdom speak to your soul. She signed it simply, Iris, and added her grandmother's old saying, "In every flower lies a prayer. In every garden lives a hope." Walking home, as the afternoon settled into early evening, Iris felt a deep contentment filling her chest like warm honey. The mountains that surrounded her valley caught the slanting light and held it, their peaks glowing rose and gold against the deepening blue of the sky. She could hear the evening song of birds beginning, a gentler melody than the morning celebration, more like a lullaby than a fanfare. Back in her cottage, Iris prepared a simple dinner of fresh bread, soft cheese, and herbs from her garden, the regular herbs that grew alongside the miraculous irises, but which seemed to have absorbed some of their magic. Everything tasted more flavorful, more alive, as if the very air of her transformed garden had blessed every growing thing. As twilight deepened and the first stars appeared, like tiny silver flowers in the darkening sky, Iris sat by her window, watching over her garden. The irises seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight, their colours muted, but somehow even more beautiful in the soft darkness. She could feel their contentment, their readiness to share their gifts with whoever might come seeking what they offered. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring the first visitors. People carrying worries like heavy stones in their pockets, hearts that had forgotten how to be still, minds that raced like frightened rabbits from one anxious thought to another. But here, In this place where time moved like flowing water and beauty bloomed without effort, they would find what they needed. Iris prepared for bed slowly, savouring each small ritual. She brushed her hair until it gleamed in the lamplight, braided it loosely so it wouldn't tangle while she slept, and chose her softest nightgown, one made of cotton so fine it felt like moonbeams against her skin. She opened her bedroom window just a crack so she could breathe the flower-scented air all night long. As she settled into her bed, pulling the quilts up to her chin, Iris felt the profound satisfaction that comes from living in harmony with one's purpose. She had always known she was meant for something special, but she had imagined it would be something grand and dramatic. Instead, she had discovered that her special gift was the ability to create peace, to nurture beauty, to offer a sanctuary where souls could rest and hearts could remember their own capacity for joy. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was the gentle whisper of irises in the night breeze, carrying their ancient messages of hope across the star-filled darkness, promising tomorrow's visitors that healing waited for them in the garden of colours, where every flower was a prayer and every breath was a blessing. Sleep came to Iris like a gentle tide, carrying her into dreams filled with rainbow bridges and fields of flowers that stretched to the horizon, where she walked hand in hand with the goddess whose name she bore, learning the secret language of petals and the forgotten songs of growing things. Chapter 2. The First Visitors. The morning sun painted the valley in shades of pearl and gold when Iris woke to the sound of footsteps on the stone path that led to her cottage. She had expected visitors, but not quite so early. Rising quietly, she wrapped her grandmother's shawl around her shoulders and peered through the lace curtains of her bedroom window. 3 figures moved slowly up the winding path, their movements careful and deliberate, like people carrying invisible burdens. Even from a distance, Iris could sense their weariness, the way they held themselves as if expecting disappointment, their eyes cast downward rather than taking in the beauty that surrounded tea. The first was an elderly woman, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her clothes simple but well cared for. She walked with a slight limp, favouring her left leg, and carried a walking stick carved from what looked like apple wood. Despite her careful grooming, there was something fragile about her, as if she were holding herself together through sheer will. Behind her came a young man, perhaps 25 years old, with the pallor of someone who spent too much time indoors. His clothes were expensive but wrinkled, as if he had slept in them. His hands shook slightly as he walked, and he kept glancing around nervously, as though expecting some unnamed threat to emerge from the peaceful landscape. The third visitor was a middle-aged woman whose face bore the marks of long worry. Her dark hair was streaked with premature grey, and her shoulders curved inward as if she were protecting herself from the world. She moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned not to trust that good things would last. Iris dressed quickly in her flowing sage dress, taking care to move quietly so as not to disturb the morning's peace. She braided her hair loosely and slipped her feet into soft leather shoes that would make no sound on the stone paths of her garden. Before leaving her cottage, she paused at her kitchen table, where she had prepared 3 cups of chamomile tea the night before, as if some inner knowing had told her exactly how many visitors to expect. She stepped outside just as the three travelers reached the edge of her transformed garden. All three stopped simultaneously, their eyes widening as they took in the extraordinary sight before them. Row upon row of irises bloomed in impossible profusion, their colours so vivid and pure that they seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "Good morning," Iris said softly, her voice carrying just far enough to reach them without startling. "I'm so glad you found your way here." The elderly woman stepped forward first, her weathered hands clasping her walking stick more tightly. Are you Iris?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am," Iris replied, moving toward them with the same unhurried grace that characterized everything in her valley. "And you are most welcome here. I was just about to have my morning tea in the garden. Would you join me?" The three visitors exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering across their faces. The middle-aged woman spoke next. "We saw your notice in the village. We weren't sure. That is, we didn't know if it was real?" Iris finished gently, understanding immediately. "I know how difficult it can be to trust in beauty when life has taught us to expect disappointment. But yes, this is real, and you are invited to stay as long as you need." She gestured toward a small grove of apple trees at the far end of the garden, where she had arranged comfortable chairs in a circle. "Would you like to sit there? The morning light is particularly lovely in that spot, and the irises there have such gentle voices." The young man looked puzzled. "Voices?" he asked, his tone mixing curiosity with skepticism. Iris smiled, her expression patient and kind. "Not voices as you might think of them, but flowers do speak in their own way. When you sit quietly among them, when you allow your mind to slow down and your breath to deepen, you begin to hear what they have to offer. It's different for everyone. Sometimes it's peace, sometimes clarity, sometimes simply the reminder that beauty exists without effort or anxiety." As they walked slowly through the garden toward the apple grove, Iris observed her visitors carefully, not with the sharp attention of judgment, but with the gentle awareness of someone who had learned to read the subtle signs of human need. The elderly woman paused frequently, not from physical exhaustion, but from wonder, her eyes drinking in the colors as if she had been thirsty for beauty for a very long time. The young man kept glancing around nervously, his body tense despite the peaceful surroundings. The middle-aged woman walked with her arms crossed over her chest, as if still protecting herself from potential harm. "My name is Margaret," the elderly woman said as they settled into the comfortable chairs beneath the apple trees. "I've lived in the next valley for 67 years, and I've never seen anything like this." "I'm David," the young man added reluctantly, as if giving his name might somehow make him vulnerable. I work in the city. Or I did. I'm taking some time off." The middle-aged woman hesitated longest before speaking. "I'm Sarah," she finally said. I don't normally believe in things like this. But I saw your notice, and something about it made you hope." Iris finished softly, pouring the fragrant chamomile tea into delicate china cups that had belonged to her. They drank their tea in comfortable silence for a while, the morning warming around them as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The irises seemed to respond to their presence, their colors deepening and brightening, as if fed by the simple act of being truly seen and appreciated. Margaret was the first to speak. "I lost my husband 6 months ago," she said, her voice steady but soft. "We were married for 43 years. Everyone tells me I should be grateful for the time we had, and I am. But I feel so lost, like I've forgotten how to find joy in anything." Iris nodded, her eyes full of compassion. "Grief is like winter," she said gently. "Necessary, natural, but so cold and grey that we begin to forget that warmth and colour ever existed. But look around you, Margaret. What do you see?" Margaret lifted her eyes from her teacup and really looked at the garden for the first time since arriving. Her gaze fell on a cluster of deep purple irises nearby. Their petals so rich and velvety, they seemed to hold the very essence of twilight. As she watched, a butterfly landed on one of the blooms, its wings a brilliant orange that created a stunning contrast with the purple petals. "Beauty," she whispered, and Iris saw tears beginning to form in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of recognition, of remembering. "Yes," Iris said softly. "Beauty that exists not because you earn it or create it or hold on to it, but simply because it is. Your husband's love was like that too, wasn't it? Not something you had to work for every day, but something that simply was, as natural and reliable as sunrise." Margaret nodded, unable to speak, but her tears were flowing freely now, and Iris could see that they were washing away some of the greyness that had settled over her spirit like dust. David had been listening to this exchange with growing agitation. "But what if?" he began, then stopped himself. "What if what?" Iris asked gently, turning her attention to him without making Margaret feel abandoned. "What if nothing lasts?" David burst out. "What if everything beautiful just dies or disappears or turns out to be fake? What if hope is just a lie we tell ourselves?" Iris was quiet for a long moment, watching a bee move from iris to iris, gathering nectar with patient efficiency. "David," she said finally, "how old do you think these apple trees are?" He looked up at the gnarled branches above them, heavy with small green apples that would ripen in the autumn. "I don't know. Old? More than 100 years, Iris told him. "They were planted by the woman who built my cottage, who lived there long before I was born. She died before I ever met her, but every spring these trees bloom. Every summer they provide shade. Every autumn they give fruit. Her gift keeps giving, season after season, year after year." She pointed to the irises surrounding them. "And these flowers, they die back every winter, disappear completely, but they return every spring, often more beautiful than before. That's not about permanence, David. It's about renewal, about trust in the cycle of things." David was quiet, but Iris could see something shifting in his expression, a tiny crack in the wall of cynicism he had built around himself. Sarah had been listening intently to both conversations, her arms gradually uncrossing as she relaxed, despite herself. "I don't know if I believe in cycles," she said slowly. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, you know? Every time something good happens, I start worrying about when it will end. Iris smiled, recognizing the particular form of suffering that came from hypervigilance, from a nervous system that had learned to expect danger even in safety. "Would you do something for me? Would you stand up and walk to that cluster of yellow irises over there? Yes, those ones that look like captured sunshine, and tell me what you notice." Sarah hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with being the center of attention. But something in Iris's gentle manner encouraged her to comply. She rose from her chair and walked slowly toward the designated flowers, her movements still careful and guarded. "What do you see?" Iris called softly. They're beautiful," Sarah replied, surprise evident in her voice. "The color is so pure, so bright, and they smell like honey and fresh air." "Now look closer. Look at the petals themselves." Sarah bent down, studying the flowers more carefully. "They're not perfect," she said after a moment. "Some of them have little brown spots, and one has a torn petal, and there's a small insect walking across that one." "Are they less beautiful because of those imperfections?" Iris asked. Sarah was quiet for a long time, really looking at the flowers, seeing them as they actually were rather than as she thought they should be. "No," she said finally, wonder creeping into her voice. "They're still beautiful. Maybe more beautiful because they're real." "Yes," Iris said, warmth filling her voice. "Beauty doesn't require perfection, Sarah. Neither does safety or love or any of the good things in life. They exist not in spite of uncertainty, but within it, like flowers blooming in a world where storms sometimes come." 3 visitors spent the rest of the morning in Iris's garden, and as the hours passed, something remarkable happened. The tight lines around David's eyes began to soften as he watched bees working among the flowers with single-minded contentment. Margaret's shoulders gradually straightened as she breathed in the flower-scented air, and felt her grief shifting from a crushing weight to something more like a bittersweet song. Sarah found herself smiling. "I keep thinking about what you said about cycles," David said as they finished eating. "In my work, I'm a software engineer. Everything is about problems and solutions, failures and fixes. I never thought about things just being and then not being, and then being again." Iris nodded. The ancient Greeks understood this. They saw time not as a straight line racing toward some destination, but as a spiral, always returning to familiar themes, but at a deeper level each time. They called it kairos, sacred time, the time of seasons and growth and meaningful repetition. "Is that why you chose irises?" Margaret asked. "Because they come back?" "Partly," Iris replied, "but also because of what they represent. In Greek mythology, Iris was the messenger goddess, the one who carried communication between different realms. She traveled on rainbow bridges, connecting heaven and earth, gods and mortals. I think we all need that sometimes. Bridges between where we are and where we're trying to go, between our pain and our healing, between our fear and our hope." As the afternoon wore on, each of the visitors found their own way of connecting with the garden. Margaret discovered that sitting quietly among the white irises brought her a sense of her husband's presence that was comforting rather than heartbreaking. David learned that he could watch the insects and birds going about their ancient business without analysing or judging, simply observing the natural flow of life. Sarah found that she could walk among the flowers without waiting for something to go wrong, gradually learning to trust in the moment rather than fearing the future. As evening approached and shadows began to lengthen across the garden, the three visitors prepared to leave, but they moved reluctantly, like people waking from a beautiful dream they weren't ready to abandon. "Will you come back?" Iris asked, though she already knew the answer from the peace that had settled over their faces. "Yes," Margaret said immediately, "if you'll have me. I feel like I've remembered something I'd forgotten, that beauty exists, that it's real, that it's not disrespectful to my grief to notice it." "I'd like to," David added, his voice stronger than it had been that morning. "I think I need to learn more about this way of being present instead of always rushing toward the next thing." Sarah nodded, her arms no longer wrapped protectively around herself. "I've never felt this calm," she admitted. "I want to understand how to carry some of this feeling back into my regular life." Iris smiled, her heart full of quiet joy. "The garden will be here whenever you need it," she promised. "And remember, you don't have to wait until you come back to practice what you've learned today. Every flower you pass on the street, every tree in your yard, every moment when you remember to breathe deeply, they're all invitations to return to this feeling of peace." As her visitors walked slowly down the stone path toward the village, Iris stood among her irises in the gathering twilight, watching until they disappeared around the bend. The flowers seemed to glow more brightly in the evening light, as if fed by the healing they had helped facilitate. That night, as she prepared for bed, Iris felt the deep satisfaction that comes from fulfilling one's purpose. She had known somehow that this garden was meant to be shared, that the magic of the irises was not for her alone but for anyone who needed the particular kind of healing that beauty and peace could provide. She fell asleep to the sound of night-blooming flowers opening their petals to the stars, their fragrance drifting through her open window like a lullaby made of sweetness and hope. In her dreams, she walked through endless gardens where people sat peacefully among flowers of every imaginable colour, their faces serene, their hearts finally at rest. Chapter 3. The Deepening Peace. In the weeks that followed, word of Iris's garden spread through the valley and beyond, carried not by advertisement or announcement, but by the quiet testimony of transformed lives. Margaret returned twice weekly, often bringing small offerings: a jar of homemade preserves, a bouquet of wildflowers from her own garden, sometimes simply a grateful smile. David came every few days, usually in the early morning, when the dew still clung to the petals and the world felt newly made. Sarah visited whenever her anxiety threatened to overwhelm her, learning to trust that peace would always be waiting for her among the flowers. Others came too, drawn by stories whispered in market squares and shared over evening meals. There was Elena, a young mother whose colicky baby never seemed to stop crying, who discovered that sitting among the lavender-coloured irises while nursing brought calm to both herself and her child. Thomas arrived with shoulders bent from years of factory work, finding that the gentle exercise of walking slowly through the garden paths eased both his physical pain and the deeper ache of feeling forgotten by the world. Sister Catherine made the journey from the nearby convent, where she had been struggling with doubt about her calling, and found among the white irises a renewed sense of the sacred that had nothing to do with doctrine and everything to do with direct experience of beauty. Iris welcomed each visitor with the same gentle attention she had shown to her first 3 guests. She learned to read the particular quality of need that each person carried, guiding some to the energizing yellow irises, others to the deeply calming purple ones, still others to the pure white blooms that seemed to offer clarity and spiritual renewal. She never prescribed or directed, but simply offered gentle suggestions, trusting that each person would find what they needed if given the space and permission to explore. As autumn approached, Iris noticed something remarkable happening. The garden was not diminishing with the changing season, as normal gardens did. Instead, the irises seemed to be deepening in color and fragrance, as if they were drawing strength from some source that transcended the usual cycles of growth and dormancy. More varieties appeared as well, deep burgundy ones that spoke of rich contentment, pale pink ones that whispered of gentle love, and extraordinary midnight blue ones that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages in their velvety depths. One particularly beautiful October morning, when the air carried the crisp promise of winter, but the sun still held summer's warmth, Iris woke to find a figure sitting quietly in her garden. At first she thought it was one of her regular visitors who had arrived especially early. But as she looked more carefully through her bedroom window, she realized this was someone she had never seen before. As autumn approached, Iris noticed something remarkable happening. The garden was not diminishing with the changing season, as normal gardens did. Instead, the irises seemed to be deepening in color and fragrance, as if they were drawing strength from some source that transcended the usual cycles of growth and dormancy. More varieties appeared as well, deep burgundy ones that spoke of rich contentment, pale pink ones that whispered of gentle love, and extraordinary midnight blue ones that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages in their velvety depths. One particularly beautiful October morning, when the air carried the crisp promise of winter, but the sun still held summer's warmth, Iris woke to find a figure sitting quietly in her garden. At first, she thought it was one of her regular visitors who had arrived especially early. But as she looked more carefully through her bedroom window, she realized this was someone she had never seen before. The figure was that of an elderly woman, but there was something timeless about her presence, as if she existed slightly outside the normal flow of moments. Her hair was silver white and seemed to catch and hold the morning light in impossible ways. She wore robes of a colour that seemed to shift between blue and purple and silver, like water under changing skies. Most remarkably, she sat perfectly still among the irises, and the flowers around her appeared to be glowing with an inner radiance that was clearly visible even in the daylight. Iris dressed carefully, sensing that this visitor was different from any who had come before. She chose her most beautiful dress, one made of fabric the colour of sage leaves after rain, and braided flowers from her garden into her hair, an old custom her grandmother had taught her for greeting honored guests. When she stepped outside, the woman turned to look at her, and Iris gasped softly. The visitor's eyes held all the colors of the rainbow, shifting and swirling like living opals. Her face was ageless in the way that mountains or oceans are ageless, bearing the marks of great experience, but somehow beyond the touch of ordinary time. "Hello, dear one," the woman said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Iris's chest. "I am the one whose name you carry, whose gifts you have been sharing." Iris felt her knees grow weak, not from fear, but from recognition. She was in the presence of the goddess Iris herself, the divine messenger whose rainbow bridges connected earth and heaven, whose gentle wisdom had guided mortals since the beginning of stories. "My lady," Iris whispered, sinking into a curtsy that felt both natural and necessary. "I am honored beyond words." The goddess smiled, and her smile was like sunrise over water. "Rise, child. You have honored me far more than I could ever honor you. This garden, this sanctuary you have created, it is the most beautiful temple that has ever been dedicated to my name." Iris rose slowly, her heart pounding with awe and joy. "I never meant to create a temple. I only wanted to share the beauty, to help people find peace." "And what do you think a temple truly is?" the goddess asked gently. "It is not a building of stone and gold, but a place where the divine and human touch each other, where healing happens, where souls remember their connection to the eternal. You have built such a place with nothing but love and attention." They walked together through the garden, and as they moved, Iris noticed that each flower they passed seemed to straighten and brighten, as if drawing energy from the goddess's presence. The very air around them shimmered with colors that had no names, and the fragrance of the irises became so intense and beautiful that it seemed to feed the soul as directly as bread feeds the body, the goddess said as they paused beside the spiral pattern of irises that had first appeared in Iris's garden. "What have you learned from tending this place?" Iris considered the question carefully, wanting to give an answer worthy of such a profound inquiry. "I have learned that healing is not something we do to people, but something we create space for them to do themselves. I have learned that beauty is not decoration or luxury, but medicine as essential as water or air. And I have learned that peace is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of trust. Trust in the natural rhythms of growing and resting, blooming and dormancy, joy and sorrow." The goddess nodded, her opal eyes bright with approval. "You understand the deeper mysteries, but tell me, what questions still trouble your heart?" Iris felt safe to speak her deepest concerns. "I worry about the people who cannot come here, who live too far away or are too ill to travel. I worry about what will happen to the garden when I am old, who will tend it and welcome visitors. And sometimes I worry that I am not doing enough, that I should be finding ways to help more people, to make a bigger difference." The goddess was quiet for a long time, watching a butterfly dance among the rainbow-colored petals. When she spoke, her words carried the gentle authority of one who has seen all of time's turnings. "Do you see that butterfly?" she asked. "It will live for only a few weeks, touching perhaps 100 flowers in its brief existence. By your measure, its impact is small. It cannot save forests or heal nations or feed the hungry masses. Yet without it and its kind, the cycle of pollination would fail, flowers would not reproduce, and the world would gradually become barren. Its small, local, temporary work is essential to the continuation of all beauty. Iris watched the butterfly with new eyes, understanding beginning to dawn. Your work here is like that butterfly's, the goddess continued. Each person you touch with peace carries that peace back into their world, where it spreads in ways you cannot see or measure. Margaret's renewed ability to find joy will comfort her grandchildren and inspire her friends. David's newfound capacity for presence will make him a better partner, a kinder colleague, a more thoughtful citizen. Sarah's growing trust will allow her to take risks that lead to new opportunities and deeper relationships. But as for your concerns about the future, the goddess said, turning to face Iris directly, I have a gift for you. She reached into the folds of her shifting robes and withdrew something that made Iris's breath catch in wonder. It was a single seed, but unlike any seed that existed in the natural world, it seemed to be made of crystallized light, holding within its translucent surface all the colors of all the irises that had ever bloomed. This is a seed of perpetual renewal, the goddess explained. Plant it at the heart of your garden, and no matter what happens, drought or flood, your eventual passing or the changing of ages, this sanctuary will continue. It will call to itself those who are meant to be its guardians, and it will ensure that peace and beauty remain available to all who seek them. Iris accepted the seed with trembling hands, feeling its warmth pulse against her palms like a tiny heartbeat. How will I know where to plant it? The goddess smiled and gestured toward the center of the spiral pattern, where the first extraordinary iris still bloomed with its ever-changing colors. There, she said simply, where the first miracle took root, let the eternal one find its home. Together, they knelt on the soft earth at the base of the central iris. The goddess showed Iris how to create a small hollow in the soil, not by digging, but by asking the earth itself to open and receive this precious gift. As Iris placed the seed in the earth and gently covered it with her hands, she felt a tremendous surge of energy flow through the ground, through the garden, through her own body, connecting everything in a web of living light. The moment the seed was planted, every iris in the garden began to glow more brightly, their colors deepening and shifting in slow, hypnotic waves. The very air seemed to thicken with peace, and Iris felt a profound sense of completion, as if she had just finished a task she had been born specifically to accomplish. Now, the goddess said, rising gracefully to her feet, your real work begins. My real work? Iris asked, confused. But I thought this was my work, tending the garden, welcoming visitors. That was your preparation, the goddess replied, her opal eyes twinkling with ancient mirth. Now you must learn to teach others what you have learned here, so they can create their own sanctuaries wherever they are needed. The seed you have planted will ensure this garden endures. But the wisdom you have gained must spread like dandelion seeds on the wind. taking root in human hearts across the world. Over the following days, the goddess remained as Iris's guest and teacher, though she was visible only to Iris herself. To the visitors who continued to come to the garden, she appeared as no more than a particularly beautiful play of light among the flowers, or perhaps a specially melodious quality to the morning birdsong. During this time, Iris learned things that no books could have taught her. She discovered how to listen to the subtle language that all growing things spoke, how to read the particular needs of each human soul that entered her sanctuary, and how to help people carry the peace of the garden back into their daily lives. The goddess taught her about the ancient practice of flower meditation, how to focus one's attention completely on a single bloom until the boundary between observer and observed dissolved, leaving only pure awareness of beauty. She learned to guide people through petal breathing, synchronized inhalation and exhalation that matched the slow, natural rhythm of flowers opening and closing with the cycles of day and night. Most importantly, she learned how to help visitors create what the goddess called pocket sanctuaries, small spaces in their own homes and lives, where they could cultivate the same sense of peace and beauty they found in the iris garden. These might be as simple as a single flower in a windowsill vase, tended with complete attention, or as elaborate as a dedicated meditation corner, filled with plants and natural objects that spoke to the soul. The goddess taught her about the ancient practice of flower meditation, how to focus one's attention completely on a single bloom until the boundary between observer and observed dissolved, leaving only pure awareness of beauty. She learned to guide people through petal breathing, synchronized inhalation and exhalation that matched the slow, natural rhythm of flowers opening and closing with the cycles of day and night. Most importantly, she learned how to help visitors create what the goddess called pocket sanctuaries, small spaces in their own homes and lives, where they could cultivate the same sense of peace and beauty they found in the iris garden. These might be as simple as a single flower in a windowsill vase, tended with complete attention, or as elaborate as a dedicated meditation corner filled with plants and natural objects that spoke to the soul. Remember, the goddess said during one of their twilight conversations, the goal is not to make people dependent on this place, but to help them discover their own capacity for creating beauty and peace wherever they are. Iris practiced these new teachings with her regular visitors, and the results were remarkable. Margaret learned to create a small shrine to her husband's memory using flowers from her own garden, transforming her grief from a burden into a celebration of love that endured beyond death. David established a morning ritual of sitting with a single houseplant before beginning his workday, finding that this simple practice helped him maintain his sense of presence and calm, even in the midst of demanding projects. Sarah planted a window box with herbs and small flowers, discovering that tending these living things gave her something beautiful to focus on whenever anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. As winter approached and the goddess prepared to return to her realm beyond the rainbow, she shared one final teaching with Iris. The most important thing you must remember, she said, as they sat together among the still blooming irises on what would be their last evening together, is that you are not the source of the healing that happens here. You are its servant, its facilitator, its humble gardener. The true power comes from the willingness of each person to open their heart to beauty, to trust in the possibility of peace, to believe that they deserve the gifts that nature freely offers. "But what if I make mistakes?" Iris asked. "What if I give someone the wrong guidance, or fail to help someone who truly needs it?" The goddess reached out and touched Iris's cheek with fingers that felt like moonlight made solid. "Dear child, the flowers make no mistakes, yet they do not bloom for everyone at the same time or in the same way. Some seeds sprout immediately, others wait for the perfect conditions, and still others may lie dormant for years before finding their moment. Your job is not to control the outcome, but to plant seeds of possibility and trust in the wisdom of growth itself." That night, as the goddess prepared to depart, she gave Iris one final gift, not an object this time, but a blessing. She placed her hands on Iris's head and spoke words in the ancient language of creation, words that seemed to settle into Iris's bones and blood, becoming part of her very essence. "From this day forward," the goddess said, "you carry within you the ability to create sanctuary wherever you go. Every space you enter will be touched by the peace you have cultivated here. Every person you meet will sense, however unconsciously, the depth of beauty you have learned to perceive. You are my ambassador in the world of ordinary time, my messenger between the realm of eternal beauty and the daily struggles of human hearts." As dawn broke over the valley, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the goddess began to fade like mist before the morning sun. But she did not disappear entirely. Instead, she seemed to disperse into the garden itself, becoming part of the light that played among the petals, the fragrance that rose from the earth, the sense of infinite peace that pervaded every corner of the sanctuary. Iris stood alone among her irises as the sun climbed higher. But she did not feel abandoned. She felt, instead, profoundly connected to the garden, to all the people who had found healing there, to the great web of beauty and compassion that connected all living things. The seed of perpetual renewal pulsed gently beneath the earth at the garden's heart, and she could feel its energy spreading through the soil, ensuring that this sanctuary would endure long after she herself had become part of the eternal cycle of growth and rest. That morning brought a new visitor to the garden, a young girl, perhaps 8 years old, who had walked alone from the village. Her clothes were patched but clean, her face solemn with the particular gravity that sometimes settles on children who have seen too much sadness too soon. "Are you the flower lady?" the girl asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I suppose I am," Iris replied gently, kneeling down so she could look directly into the child's eyes. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lily," the girl said, then added with a small smile, "Like the flower." "A beautiful name for a beautiful soul," Iris said warmly. "What brings you to my garden today, Lily?" The child looked around at the blooming irises with wonder, her eyes growing wide as she took in their impossible colours and perfect forms. "My mama is very sad," she said finally, She cries all the time since Papa went away. I thought maybe if I brought her something really pretty, it might help." Iris felt her heart swell with compassion for this small girl who was trying to heal her mother's broken heart with the instinctive wisdom that children sometimes possess. "I think that's a wonderful idea," she said softly. "But before you choose flowers for your mama, would you like to sit with me for a little while? Sometimes flowers have things to teach us before we take them home." And so began Iris's work as a teacher, sharing the wisdom the goddess had given her with all who came seeking peace and beauty. As winter settled over the valley and the world outside grew cold and grey, the Garden of Irises continued to bloom in defiant celebration of eternal spring, offering its gifts to anyone brave enough to believe that beauty could triumph over sorrow, that peace was possible even in troubled times, and that love, once planted in the fertile soil of an open heart, would continue to bloom forever. Chapter 4: The Eternal Garden. As the seasons turned and years flowed like a gentle river through the valley, Iris's garden became more than a place of healing. It became a living legend, a source of stories that spread far beyond the boundaries of the small villages tucked among the hills. People spoke of miraculous recoveries from depression and anxiety, of marriages saved by partners who had learned to find peace within themselves, of children who grew up knowing that beauty was their birthright and peace was always available to those who knew how to cultivate it. Iris herself had changed too, though so gradually that she hardly noticed the transformation. Her hair had taken on silver threads that caught the light like streams of starshine, and her eyes had deepened to hold something of the ageless wisdom she had absorbed from her communion with the goddess. She moved through her days with a grace that seemed to emanate from some inner source of perpetual calm. And people often remarked that simply being in her presence made them feel more peaceful, even before they entered the garden proper. The garden had evolved as well, expanding naturally as new varieties of irises appeared with each changing season. There were now pathways lined with flowers of every conceivable hue, quiet alcoves perfect for solitary contemplation, and gathering spaces where small groups could sit together in companionable silence. The original spiral pattern remained at the heart of it all, that it had grown into a complex mandala of living colour that seemed to shift and flow like a kaleidoscope made of petals and light. One particularly luminous spring morning, as Iris was tending to a bed of newly emerged pale green shoots that would soon become magnificent purple blooms, she heard familiar footsteps on the stone path. Turning, she smiled to see Margaret approaching, but this was a transformed Margaret from the broken woman who had first stumbled into her garden years before. Margaret's silver hair now gleamed with health and vitality, and she carried herself with the dignified grace of someone who had learned to balance grief with joy, memory with hope. In her hands, she carried a small wicker basket filled with what appeared to be tiny seedlings. "Good morning, dear Iris," Margaret called out, her voice warm with affection. "I've brought you something special today." Iris wiped her hands on her gardening apron and walked over to greet her old friend. "Margaret, you look absolutely radiant this morning. What treasures have you brought me?" Margaret's eyes sparkled with excitement as she opened her basket to reveal dozens of small iris seedlings, each one carefully potted in small clay containers. "These are from my own garden," she explained. "I've been collecting seeds from the irises you gave me permission to take home over the years, and I've learned to cultivate them myself. I thought perhaps some of them might like to return to their birthplace." Iris felt tears of joy prick her eyes as she— "Margaret, this is the most wonderful gift imaginable," Iris said, embracing her friend warmly. "These aren't just plants. They're living proof that the garden has been spreading its influence exactly as it was meant to." As they worked together to find perfect spots for each new seedling, Margaret shared news from the village and beyond. David had indeed become a different person, using his engineering skills to design gardens and green spaces for schools and hospitals, bringing the healing power of nature to places where it was most needed. Sarah had started a support group for people struggling with anxiety, teaching them the breathing techniques and mindfulness practices she had learned in Iris's garden. "But the most remarkable thing," Margaret continued, her voice filled with wonder, "is what's happening with the children. Lily. Do you remember little Lily, who came to you when she was 8? She's 16 now, and she's created a garden club at her school. They're teaching younger children how to grow flowers and vegetables. But more than that, they're teaching them what you taught her: how to find peace in growing things, how to trust in the natural cycles of life." Iris nodded, remembering the solemn little girl who had wanted to pick flowers to heal her mother's sadness. She had indeed taken home a small bouquet that day, but more importantly, she had absorbed the deeper teaching about how beauty and attention could transform sorrow into something more bearable, more meaningful. "And her mother?" Iris asked gently. "Flourishing," Margaret replied with a smile. "It took time, of course, but watching Lily tend her little garden patch, seeing how the child found such joy and purpose in nurturing living things, somehow gave her mother permission to start nurturing herself again. She's a master gardener now, known throughout the region for the roses she grows using techniques that blend practical knowledge with what she calls flower meditation." As they finished planting the new seedlings, Iris felt a familiar presence stirring in the garden. It was not the overwhelming divinity of the goddess herself, but something gentler, the accumulated wisdom of all the healing that had taken place here, the living memory of every person who had found peace among the flowers. "Margaret," Iris said softly, "I want to show you something I've never shown anyone before." She led her friend to the very center of the spiral mandala, where the original extraordinary iris still bloomed with its ever-changing colors. But now, around its base, a ring of new growth had appeared. Irises that seemed to be made of crystallized light, their petals translucent and luminous, pulsing gently with the rhythm of some cosmic heartbeat. "My goodness," Margaret breathed, reaching out instinctively before catching herself. "May I?" "Of course," Iris said. "They want to be touched, to share their energy. These grew from the seed the goddess gave me. They are the physical manifestation of the eternal renewal she promised." Margaret knelt and gently placed her palm against one of the luminous flowers. Immediately, her face was suffused with an expression of profound peace and understanding. "I can feel it," she whispered. "The connection to everything, every flower I've ever tended every person I've ever comforted, every moment of beauty I've ever witnessed. It's all connected, all part of one magnificent pattern. They sat together in comfortable silence among the crystal irises as the morning sun climbed higher, warming their faces and filling the garden with golden light. Other visitors began to arrive, some familiar faces who came regularly for their dose of peace and beauty, others who were experiencing the garden for the first time, led by stories or simple intuition to this place of healing. Iris watched them all with the gentle attention that had become her trademark, noting who gravitated toward which colors and types of flowers, who needed solitude and who benefited from quiet companionship. There was an elderly man with arthritis who found that sitting among the blue irises eased his pain better than any medication. A young couple struggling with infertility discovered that the pink irises seemed to nurture hope and strengthen their bond with each other. A teenager dealing with depression was slowly learning to trust that the bright yellow flowers could teach him how to find reasons for joy, even on the darkest days. "You know," Margaret said thoughtfully, as they watched the peaceful scene unfolding around them, "I think I understand now why the goddess chose you specifically for this work." "Oh?" Iris asked, curious about her friend's perspective. "It's not just your kindness, though that's certainly part of it. And it's not just your natural ability with plants, though you have that in abundance. I think it's because you never try to fix people." Iris considered this observation carefully. "What do you mean?" "Most of us, when we see someone in pain, we want to do something. Give advice, offer solutions, make the hurt go away as quickly as possible. But you've always understood that healing happens in its own time, according to its own rhythm. You create the conditions for healing and then trust the process completely." Margaret paused, watching a butterfly land on one of the crystal irises, its wings reflecting the flower's inner light like tiny mirrors. "You're like a master gardener of souls, Iris. You prepare the soil, plant the seeds, provide water and sunlight, and then you wait with infinite patience for whatever is meant to bloom." As the day progressed and evening began to paint the sky in shades of lavender and rose, the garden took on an even more magical quality. The crystal irises at the center began to glow more brightly, their light spreading outward through the other flowers like ripples on a pond. Visitors who had been preparing to leave found themselves drawn back, reluctant to abandon this extraordinary display of natural beauty. That evening, something unprecedented happened. As the last rays of sunlight faded and stars began to appear in the darkening sky, every iris in the garden began to emit its own gentle luminescence. The effect was breathtaking. Thousands upon thousands of flowers glowing like earthbound stars, creating a landscape of living light that seemed to bridge the gap between heaven and earth. "Look," Margaret whispered, pointing toward the horizon. Iris followed her gaze and gasped in wonder. A bridge of multicolored light was forming in the sky above them. Not quite a rainbow, for there had been no rain, but something far more extraordinary. The bridge seemed to be made of the same crystalline light as the central irises, and it stretched from the garden up into the star-filled heavens, creating a pathway that seemed to shimmer with divine possibility. "It's her!" Iris breathed, recognizing the signature of the goddess in this miraculous display. "She's showing everyone what we've built here. A bridge between the earthly and the eternal, between human suffering and divine beauty." Visitors throughout the garden had noticed the phenomenon now, and their quiet conversations gave way to awed silence as they witnessed something that would live in their memories forever. Children reached up toward the bridge of light with wondering hands, while adults felt tears of recognition streaming down their faces as they glimpsed, perhaps for the first time, the reality of the sacred that existed all around them, always available but rarely perceived. The light show continued for nearly an hour, bathing the entire valley in gentle radiance that seemed to heal everything it touched. Animals emerged from the surrounding forests to witness the spectacle. Deer and rabbits, owls and nightingales, even wild foxes and shy woodland creatures that normally fled from human presence. All of them seemed drawn by the same inexplicable magnetism that had been calling human hearts to this garden for years. As the light gradually faded and the bridge dissolved back into starlight, a profound hush settled over the garden. People remained where they were, reluctant to break the spell by moving or speaking. In that sacred silence, Iris felt a deep knowing settle into her heart. This had been a culmination and a beginning, an acknowledgement of what had been accomplished and a promise of what was yet to come. Over the following days, word of the light bridge spread throughout the region and beyond. Pilgrims began arriving from distant cities and foreign countries, drawn by stories of miracles and healing that grew in the telling, but somehow never exceeded the simple truth of what actually occurred in Iris's garden. Scientists came to study the phenomenon and left as mystics. Skeptics arrived determined to debunk what they assumed was elaborate trickery, and departed as believers in mysteries beyond their understanding. But Iris handled this increased attention with the same gentle wisdom she had always shown. She never claimed to be anything more than a gardener who had learned to listen to flowers. She never charged admission or suggested donations, trusting that the garden would provide for itself. Instead, she focused on what she had always done best, creating space for healing, offering the quiet presence that allowed people to discover their own capacity for peace, and tending the ever-expanding sanctuary that continued to bloom with impossible beauty regardless of season or weather. Years passed in this gentle rhythm of growth and service. Iris aged gracefully, her hair becoming completely silver, her face lined with the kind of wrinkles that come from decades of genuine smiling. Her movements grew slower, but no less graceful, and her presence became even more powerfully calming as she learned to embody ever more completely the peace she had cultivated. Margaret became her closest collaborator, officially taking the title of assistant garden keeper, and learning to guide visitors with the same intuitive wisdom Iris herself possessed. David established a foundation that helped replicate Iris gardens in hospitals and schools around the world, each one carrying seeds from the original sanctuary. Sarah wrote books about her healing journey, that helped thousands of people learn to manage anxiety through connection with nature. But perhaps most remarkably, Lily grew up to become Iris's chosen successor. The solemn 8-year-old who had wanted to pick flowers for her sad mother matured into a young woman with an even deeper connection to the mysteries of the garden than Iris herself possessed. She could communicate with the crystal irises directly, understanding their silent language of light and colour. She had inherited not just Iris's gift for healing, but an expanded version of it, one that seemed perfectly suited for the challenges of a rapidly changing world. On a perfect spring morning, when the garden was at the height of its bloom and the air shimmered with pollen and possibility, Iris made a decision that had been growing in her heart for months. She called Lily to join her at the center of the spiral mandala, where the crystal irises pulsed with their eternal light. "My dear child," Iris said, taking Lily's hands in her own weathered ones, "it's time for me to teach you the final secret of the garden." Lily nodded solemnly, her eyes bright with anticipation and trust. "The secret," Iris continued, "is that the garden was never really mine. It belongs to itself, to the goddess who blessed it, to every person who has found healing here, and to the future generations who will continue to need what it offers. My role was simply to serve as its first keeper, to establish the patterns and practices that would allow it to flourish." As Lily's palm touched the luminous petals, her eyes widened with wonder and understanding. Through that connection, she could feel the vast network of healing that had spread from this small valley to encompass the entire world. Every iris garden that had been planted using seeds from this sanctuary, every person who had learned to find peace among flowers, every child who had grown up knowing that beauty was a form of medicine and nature was a source of wisdom. "Do you accept the role of garden keeper?" Iris asked formally, though she already knew the answer from the radiant joy on Lily's face. "I do," Lily replied, her voice carrying the same quality of gentle authority that had characterized Iris's own speech for so many years. In that moment, something shifted in the garden's energy. The crystal irises pulsed more brightly, and every flower in the sanctuary seemed to lift its face toward the young woman who would guide their continued growth and evolution. Even the goddess herself seemed to whisper approval through the rustling of leaves and the singing of birds. Iris felt a tremendous sense of completion settle over her, along with something she hadn't expected, a profound tiredness that came not from exhaustion, but from the deep satisfaction of that evening, as the sun set behind the mountains and painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. Iris took one final walk through her beloved garden. Each flower seemed to glow with gratitude as she passed, and she could feel the accumulated love of everyone who had ever found peace here, blessing her with every step. At the heart of the spiral mandala, she sat down among the crystal irises and closed her eyes, breathing deeply of the flower-scented air that had sustained her for so many years. As she sat in perfect stillness, she felt her consciousness beginning to expand beyond the boundaries of her physical form, merging gradually with the living light of the eternal flowers. When Lily found her the next morning, Iris's body sat peacefully among the crystal irises, a gentle smile on her face and her silver hair stirring softly in the morning breeze. But she was no longer contained within that mortal form. Instead, she had become part of the garden itself, present in every petal, every fragrance, every beam of light that filtered through the leaves. The crystal irises glowed more brightly than ever before, and visitors to the garden swore they could sometimes hear a familiar voice in the whisper of wind through the flowers, offering the same gentle guidance and unconditional welcome that had characterized Iris's years of service. Under Lily's loving care, the garden continued to grow and evolve, attracting new visitors from every corner of the world, while maintaining the essential character that made it a sanctuary for weary souls. The light bridge appeared more frequently now, sometimes several times a month, as if the boundary between earthly and divine was growing thinner in this place where so much love had been planted and tended. Margaret lived to see her 100th birthday, spending her final years teaching children the art of flower meditation and passing on the stories of the garden's early days. David's foundation flourished, creating healing gardens on every continent and training a new generation of garden keepers in the principles Iris had discovered. Sarah's books became classics in the field of nature-based healing, inspiring therapists and counselors around the world to incorporate the wisdom of flowers into their practice. But it was Lily who carried forward the most important aspect of Iris's legacy: the understanding that healing happens not through dramatic intervention, but through the patient cultivation of conditions in which peace can naturally bloom. Under her guidance, the garden became not just a destination for the wounded, but a training ground for healers, a place where people could learn to create their own sanctuaries wherever life took them. And so the Garden of Irises continued to flourish, season after season, year after year, its beauty expanding ever outward like ripples on an infinite pond. The goddess's promise of eternal renewal was kept not through supernatural intervention, but through the natural human capacity for love, attention, and the willingness to serve something greater than oneself. In the end, Iris's greatest miracle was not the appearing of magical flowers or bridges of light, but the simple demonstration that one person's commitment to beauty and peace could create waves of healing that would spread throughout the world and continue long after that person had returned to the eternal source of all growing things. And in gardens around the world, whenever someone sits quietly among flowers and feels their heart grow peaceful, whenever a troubled soul finds comfort in the simple act of tending growing things, whenever beauty triumphs over despair and hope blooms in the most unlikely places, there the spirit of Iris continues her gentle work, proving again and again that love, once planted in the fertile soil of an open heart, will continue to bloom forever. The garden sleeps now under starlight, its crystal irises glowing softly in the darkness, their light a beacon for all who seek the peace that passes understanding. And in that gentle radiance, the promise is renewed with each dawn, that beauty will endure, that healing is always possible, and that somewhere in the world there will always be a garden where weary souls can rest and remember their own eternal capacity for joy. The end.